Hi, everybody. It's Dr. Carolyn Coco-Ross, and today I'm going to be talking about why do I binge when I feel shame. Now, binging, obsessing about food, body dissatisfaction can all be ways in which we try to deal with the emotion of shame. But what is shame? Well, Brene Brown says shame is an intensely painful feeling or experience that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So it's kind of a feeling like we're being separated from the herd, so to speak, because there's something so wrong with us. Now, I don't know about you, but I've had not more than one episode of shame in my life, and most recently in the past week, where I made a mistake and had just an incredibly painful few days where I, beat myself up and felt bad about myself and felt so much shame. So I'm going to be talking to you about what you can do if that comes up for you. But one thing to notice is shame that may have happened in childhood can be triggered by present life experiences. So when you were a child, were you ever made to feel like there was something about you that just wasn't right? Maybe comments were made about your size or shape, or something was said about your appearance, or it could have been something about how much or what you were eating. Or it may have been anything else about you. Maybe that you like to read books, or you're very smart, or you're very artistic. And that feeling of shame could have stayed with you even as an adult. So when you've been shamed as a child, you may have come to believe that you're bad or worthless. And this leads to the development of an inner critic. And the inner critic tells you you're bad whenever anything goes wrong in your life. And that younger child part of yourself, your child self, believes it. So the inner critic says you're bad, and that little child inside says you're right, I'm bad. So shame is so powerful. It can make you afraid of making mistakes. And obviously, it's impossible to never make a mistake. I mean, even if you're a perfectionist, you will make mistakes. But when you are afraid of making mistakes, that leads to secrecy, isolation, and also perfectionism, always trying to avoid making mistakes, which, is it's almost a full-time job, right? So why do we binge or overeat when we feel shame? Well, because shame is one of the most powerful and painful emotions. It's so hard to tolerate. I can tell you from this week's experience, I was very vividly reminded of how difficult it is just to deal with and tolerate the shame. Because shame can make you feel like you want to disappear. It feels like your heart is being ripped out of your chest, or like you've had a punch in the gut. Not a good feeling. And most of us would do anything to not feel shame. So we can turn to food. That's our usual go-to. Turn to food for comfort and turn to food to stop the shame. But the problem with that is that when you turn to food, then you also have shame about binging or overeating. So we know that being shamed in childhood can cause more severe binge eating behaviors. So binging, when you feel shame, can make you feel good for a short time, but then you feel shame about binging. So you start by having shame, and to get rid of the shame, you binge, but then you feel bad about binging, which causes more shame. And you get the picture. You're caught up in a vicious cycle. And we know that binge eating increases feelings of shame and perpetuates that vicious cycle. So experiencing shame in childhood can also be caused by being abused or neglected, or by childhood trauma. But what shame ultimately does is rob us of a sense of security, a sense of self-acceptance and self-confidence. And these feelings of inadequacy can last throughout your life. So the best way to deal with shame is through self-compassion. How do you define self-compassion? It's being kind and understanding towards yourself, no matter what mistakes you make, no matter what your flaws are. So in other words, it's easy to feel confident and to feel without shame when you're doing great. But self-compassion is about feeling that way even when you're not doing great. So not waiting until you're perfect and you've achieved all your goals and you're wealthy, you're doing good in your career and you have the great girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. No, it's about being kind to yourself in the worst of times. So when you've lost the job, when you've made that horrible mistake, when something really big has gone wrong in your life and shame comes up to haunt you, self-compassion is the only antidote. So how do you know if you are in need of self-compassion? Well, that's a good question. So I'm going to give you just a couple little. If you are failing at something that's important to you and you are consumed by feelings of inadequacy, then you're in need of self-compassion. If when you're feeling down, you think, oh, everybody else is happy, only I'm the only one who's not happy. When you fail at something that's important to you, do you feel alone, like you're the only, screw up in the world? When you feel down, do you tend to obsess and fixate on what's wrong? Those are all signs of the need for self-compassion. Those are signs that shame is taking hold and you need to practice self-compassion. So how do you practice self-compassion? First of all, trying to be understanding and patient with your mistakes, or understanding and patient about the parts of your personality that you don't like you're lazy, or you have trouble concentrating, or whatever else, or even about your eating behaviors, like you give in to cravings. Well, you don't have to make that a source of shame. You can be patient with yourself. You can also see your failings as part of the human condition. The Buddhists say that pain is part of the human condition. So everybody's going to have some bad times in their life at some point. So if you can remind yourself that this is part of the human condition. Now, when something upsets you, if you can keep your emotions in balance. Now, how do you do that? That's so hard to do, I think. But what I've found is just getting up, doing the things you're supposed to do every day, even when you wake up feeling that shame. So don't skip the exercise class. Don't call in sick to work, because continuing to do the things that make you feel fulfilled and good about yourself will help reduce the shame. Also, just trying not to judge yourself for your flaws. Again, there are no perfect people. There's nobody in the world who can avoid making a mistake 100% of the time. And if they tell you that they are, then they're lying. So let me give you a little quick exercise. And I also don't want to forget to tell you that in the notes below, you can see you can access a free gift that we're going to give you, which will also help you deal with shame and learn self-compassion. So look for that link to the free gift in the box below. But I want to just ask you to do this exercise. Picture yourself at your family dinner table. Look around you. Who's there? What foods are on the table? Are there any foods that are forbidden for you to eat, or any foods that you've been told you should only eat in small amounts? Okay, well, how did you feel when that happened? So just imagine family dinners at your house. What were the sources of shame? And write about that in your journal. The second thing I encourage you to do is to imagine a time when you were shamed about your body, no matter what it was. Maybe you were told that you were voluptuous and that made you feel ashamed, or you were told that you were too heavy and that made you feel ashamed. So just think of the times when your body has been shamed and see if you can identify where in your body you feel that shame. Is it in your chest, in your belly, your neck, your shoulders? Where? Okay. So once you identify those sources of shame, then I want you to go to that link that I just mentioned where the free gift is, and to use that guided process to help you work on any sources of shame you have, whether they be from childhood or something that's more recent, and work on that shame so that you don't have to be held captive by shame. We know that shame increases your risk for depression, for hopelessness, for social isolation. Don't let it stop you. It doesn't have to. If you had seen me 3 days ago, you would know how these strategies do work, because I'm not just telling you to use them. I had to tell myself to use them when I felt shame. So they do work. So I just want to remind you to subscribe to my channel and turn on your notifications so you can know when the next upload of a new video happens. I appreciate your listening. Thank you, and see you next time.